Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Knowledge is Power. We will be talking about the importance of knowledge in the contact center for improving first contact resolution. Starting off by understanding the reasons why customers contact you and the information they are after, we will then be looking at how to use the power of that insight to deliver the right knowledge at the right time and in the right format for a faster, more accurate and efficient service that keeps your customers happy and your revenue healthy. We will be hearing from Steve Morrell, Managing Director of Contact Center Industry Expert and Analyst ContactBabel, who will exclusively share the key findings of his latest research with us, focusing particularly on the impact of knowledge on CXM performance. Also presenting today is Steve Nattress, Product Director here at Enghouse Interactive, who will talk about how Enghouse solutions can help you identify and deliver the knowledge needed to effectively improve FCR rates, as well as measure its impact on your business objectives. Good morning to you both. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Astrid Pocklington. I'm a marketing manager here at Enghouse Interactive, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Let me start off with a few housekeeping announcements. This webinar will be recorded and made available to you afterwards via email. You can ask questions via the chat functionality here within GoToWebinar. I quickly show you how to do that. All you need to do is click on the orange arrow to expand the control panel. Then you go down to the questions section, type your question and hit send. We will allow time for questions at the end of the webinar. We also plan to do a few polls throughout the webinar to get your views and keep you involved in our discussion. In fact, I would like to start off with a simple one right now. So before I hand over to our experts, let's get a quick idea of how popular FCR as a contact center metrics actually is by asking our audience. So, if you could please answer the question, do you currently measure FCR with a simple yes or no? Okay. I think the results are in. Okay. Steve, from ContactBabel, perhaps I can ask you first, are you surprised by this result?
Yes, in fact, I am. At the moment, the UK industry, about 80% of contact centres in the UK will measure first contact resolution. It has gone up a great deal. We've been tracking this metric for the last 10 years, and 10 years ago, it was a minority, it was around this kind of proportion. So yeah, it's quite surprising to me, and hopefully we'll be able to say in the presentation why FCR is actually, a pretty important thing to try and keep an eye on.
Well, hopefully during the course of this presentation, they'll realise that it's a good thing to measure and why it's important. So yeah, that's a good opportunity. Maybe we'll convince this collection to this audience to change their view during the presentation.
Thank you. Well, without further ado, Steve Morrell, if you would like to take over.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. So this webinar is taken from key findings of our new report, the Inner Circle Guide to First Contact Resolution. It's an independent analyst report based on large numbers of surveys in the UK and US, so there's two different versions available there. And it actually says it's going to be available for free download on our website on Thursday the 7th. I've brought things forward. It is actually available now. So if you want to pop along there afterwards and download it, you're more than welcome to. So we call first contact resolution the miracle metric. For many businesses, there's no fixed agreement on what a successful contact center actually looks like. You can be told to focus on costs, efficiency, quality, revenue, and/or customer satisfaction, or all the above. And some of these metrics, they can seem mutually exclusive. First contact resolution is somewhat different because it's a win-win for both the customer and the business. So, customers have a better experience when their queries are answered first time, and obviously it's quicker for them if they don't have to call back. And businesses gain from this as well. So as we'll see in a moment, about 1 in 5 calls are actually about issues that the customer has previously tried to resolve. So, these costs really mount up if the customer's having to ring in multiple times. And that's even even without taking into account any emails or web chats that they might have tried as well. Regularly not being able to answer customer queries is demoralizing for agents, and this can have a negative impact on attrition and absence. So if an agent's empowered and confident that they can help, then obviously, that will have a positive impact on them and also, upon their metrics and indeed your costs. So this first chart here shows the results of a survey of 1,000 UK customers who were asked what the top 3 most important factors were that impacted upon their customer experience. And you can see the different coloured bars here at the bottom of the screen refer to the different age groups. So, age groups feel differently about certain things. But, adding all these things up, as we can see, having their issue resolved first time rated extremely highly across all age groups, particularly amongst older customers. So you have 64% of the 65-plus-year-olds there saying that's one of their top 3. And, all of these things are things that a lot of customers would like to have from their contact center. It's just a matter of, which of these really good things is the most important. So you see, first contact resolution is more important than having a short queue time, having UK-based agents, or even having polite and friendly employees. And it's important to note that we've been running these types of survey, these questions for a number of years, and this is a very consistent finding. So businesses looking to understand what really drives customer experience and therefore customer satisfaction should really pay particular attention to this chart. However, he says, just because first contact resolution is vitally important to customers doesn't mean it's always seen the same way by businesses. So this chart on the left, a rather colourful thing, shows the customer experience metric upon which the board or C-level management place the most emphasis when they're looking at the success or otherwise of the customer experience program, which obviously the contact center plays a huge part in. We can see clearly here that Net Promoter Score and customer satisfaction score are rated far more highly than first contact resolution, which is only seen as the #1 metric by 5% of the businesses that we surveyed. It's probably worth noting here that the argument for focusing on customer satisfaction makes a lot of sense, but this metric only shows what customers are feeling rather than why they're feeling it. First contact resolution has a direct effect on the levels of customer satisfaction and therefore NPS. And while it's obviously not the only factor impacting on this, the previous chart, the customer chart, suggests that senior management should maybe take this more seriously. On the right-hand side, the chart shows whether customer-facing employees are financially rewarded based on any of these CX-related metrics. And again, we can see that first contact resolution is rarely rewarded compared to revenue-focused metrics like cross-sell and upsell rate and the ubiquitous NPS. So, if businesses believe that first contact resolution and customer experience is closely linked, as they seem to be, from the words of the customers themselves, then there's an opportunity to look at encouraging and rewarding agents to go the extra mile for customers. So I have a second poll question here, and this looks at the motivation for improving first contact resolution. So as a business, why would you want to do this? Obviously there's a number of reasons. Please select the most important. So is it to improve customer retention, to boost customer satisfaction, to increase customer spend, or to manage contact center cost and efficiency?
Steve, I'll give it another few seconds to allow people to cast their vote.
This is not straightforward, this, not like the last one.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at the results.
Interesting. Seems to be from the people are thinking about the focus on customer satisfaction, which you might have expected there, and retention, which is kind of revenue-based thing as well. not so much on contact center cost and efficiency. That's quite interesting to me, because improving or rather decreasing the number of repeat calls does have a massive impact on cost, certainly. So
it's probably seen as a side benefit. I mean, yeah, especially we're seeing more and more that businesses are recognizing that customer satisfaction leads and retention leads to better revenue, and cost and efficiency is less important than that increased revenue. So especially in the challenging times that the businesses are starting to see now. So
yeah,
maybe that's a reflection of that as well.
Absolutely. It's also a bit of a cheat question, because it can impact positively on all of these things. So it's really a matter of what's your number one reason, rather than discounting any of the others.
Very true.
Okay, so yes, this chart, measuring first contact resolution, not as straightforward as it looks here. So please don't look at this and think things are going worse. So there's quite a lot to get through here. So hopefully I've established already that first contact resolution should be seen as a key metric, because that's what the customers are saying, and that it plays an important part in customer experience. However, unlike traditional metrics like call duration or speed to answer, it's really not straightforward to measure. There isn't a single right way to measure first contact resolution. The report talks about various methods and really, but it's not saying do this one and don't do that one. I mean, for example, some businesses exclude call transfers from this metric, others include it. Some allow agents to call a customer back with an answer, others don't, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter. The absolute key to measuring first contact resolution is through being consistent. If you're running a project or an initiative to improve FCR, decide up front how you want to measure it and then stick with that. Of course, this does mean that first contact resolution is of limited use as an external benchmark when you're trying to compare yourselves with other businesses. So although I've thrown these stats in here, take them with a pinch of salt. If you're running at 60% or 90%, then that doesn't really matter. It really depends on how you were doing last year or next year. And as we'll see in a minute, it's not always the case that high first contact resolution rates are always positive. So, for example, if you have a successful rollout of self-service functionality, then that means that hopefully a lot of simple queries that would have impacted positively on FCR because they're easy to answer, and then taken out of the equation. So, your first contact resolution rate may actually drop, and this is, going to cause concern if you don't understand what's going on. So it's probably better to track the number of repeat calls that you get in rather than the proportion of repeat calls. Pretty important point, that. So there are quite a few ways to find out what scale of repeat calls your contact center is dealing with. The most widely used is through quality assurance and monitoring of recorded calls, but of course, unless this is done automatically, there's a risk of misunderstanding the scale and reason for repeat calls. As supervisors just simply can't listen to every call. Agents can certainly play their part. That's through adding call disposition codes at the end of the call that can indicate whether it's a repeat call, and if so, maybe what it's been about. Might be difficult to get the exact categories right, so that's a bit of a blunt instrument, and it needs quite fine tuning that. They can also ask a question to the customer as to whether their query has been fully answered, or do that through an IVR survey. But it's important to understand that just because the calls itself is okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the follow-up actions will be carried out successfully. And if the customer then has to ring back, then that will obviously mean that the call wasn't in fact resolved, even though it's been marked as resolved. So you can see how it's getting more complex. About 2/3 of businesses track repeat calls for customers within a specific time frame. So for example, do they call back within 48 hours or within a week? But that won't necessarily identify repeat calls accurately, because if you get a call which is connected with the same issue but outside that time period, then you're missing that. And or additionally, there's nothing to stop a customer calling the next day about an entirely different issue, so that might sort of mess that metric up as well. On the face of it, there doesn't seem to be any perfect way to track repeat calls, but although it's used in a minority of cases, automated interaction analytics is increasingly being used to assess 100% of the calls being received, and then automatically and intelligently decide whether or not the repeat calls about the same issue. And I do think that's something we're going to see a lot more of in the future. And you might notice in this presentation I use the phrase first contact resolution rather than first call resolution. And that's because about 30% of inbound interactions are through digital channels now, like email, social media, and web chat. So it's important to kind of emphasize that FCR is not always about voice. And we can see with this chart that shows the proportion of interactions that need an alternative channel to resolve an issue. That digital channels, especially social media, will often need, it's most often a phone call, but it could be maybe an email, or it'll need an alternative channel. So the thing is, it might not even be the case that the channel itself has failed. So for example, customers and businesses might not feel comfortable using social media to talk about issues that require confidential data, and people might need to be taken through security first, which maybe the business, maybe the customer, maybe both are happier doing through voice rather than putting it on social. So that will force it into a phone call rather than being any kind of fault of the channel in itself. If possible, an omni-channel approach should be taken here. So if possible, get a seamless and contextual transfer between channels in order to maintain the feeling for the customer that it's actually still the same interaction. They're not having to give up and then start again. That's really quite important to them. It is easier in the case of digital only channels. So for example, if you have a web self-service session that then escalates to a web chat that feels like part of the same interaction. But as customers, we've all experienced web chat agents or more likely chatbots telling us that we'll have to call the contact center to resolve any issue that's a little bit out of the ordinary. So digital channels they're not necessarily a panacea for all ills in this case. It's worth looking at a bit more depth about my rather counterintuitive statement that low first contact resolution rates can actually be better than having an FCR in the 90% and above range. As I said, in a situation where contact centers are dealing with a large number of simple repetitive calls, FCR might be very high, as the agents are capable of handling pretty much all the calls that come through without any particular difficulty. However, in this case, your cost is going to be considerably higher than it needs to be, because they could be handled through self-service, or a lot of them could be handled through self-service, and moving a lot of proportion of these calls to self-service has a really positive effect on cost. But if the reasons for any repeat calls aren't also addressed, then you're going to see the FCR rate drop dramatically, even though the contact center is now acting in a far more cost-efficient way. The same thing can happen if the self-service experience is particularly poor. So customers will then call in with questions that could have been handled on the website, driving up the number of simple calls that are easily handled by an agent, which then drives up the FCR, which looks great, but in fact it's not good. This is also the case if you've got things like unclear marketing communications that are put out to the customer base, which then drives a wave of unnecessary inbound calls, which can be handled by agents. So again, like I said, the actual rate is less important than the number of repeat calls that you're getting. Something to bear in mind, final point there, was a lot of repeat calls are driven by mistakes from elsewhere in the enterprise. So that's a situation known as failure demand. This can be anything from not delivering an item in a specified timescale to failing to answer emails quickly, which then turn into phone calls, as you know. By no means all of these issues point to problems within the contact center, but let's be realistic, it is still the contact center's job to tidy this up. So before you can fix anything, you kind of need to understand what the problems really are. And regardless of channel, the real key to improving FCR is understanding the reasons that customers contact you multiple times. There's no single way of doing this. Most companies use multiple methods to identify the areas of greatest concern so they can focus their efforts on them first. Customer satisfaction surveys is a very popular way of finding that out, especially those surveys that give the customers an opportunity to describe issues in their own words, excuse me, rather than simply giving a mark out of 10. As I mentioned before, automated analysis of call recordings, that's increasingly being used, and year by year people are seeing it as being more and more effective. And taking a step beyond speech analytics, customer journey analysis includes all the stages along a customer's journey. So for example, understanding where potential customers drop out, overall effort the customer has to put in, the point at which buying decisions are made, bottlenecks in the processes, probably most relevantly, the points where customers get stuck and have to call or email the business. I mentioned just now about how failure demand can drive repeat calls. And even something as simple as IVR misrouting can end up putting calls through to agents who have less chance of answering that specific query correctly. And Steve will be talking later about the importance of having up-to-date and consistent knowledge bases. And having even a single piece of wrong information given out to a substantial part of the customer base does have the potential to create a huge number of repeat calls quite unnecessarily. And finally, it might also be the case that specific agents just don't know where to find a particular piece of information. So that's something that should be picked up in QA, or more likely through kind of large scale analysis of all of the calls that they're handling. There's quite a lot of solutions that can impact positively on repeat calls. I'll mention a few of these briefly. I'll go into much more depth within the report. Probably the most widely used of these is web self-service, which of course has to be accurate and up to date. Some businesses, it's a minority at the moment, we're seeing a lot of interest in it, are using AI-enabled real-time analytics on the agent desktops to suggest next best action to the agent based on kind of what's worked before in this situation, and also presenting any other relevant information within the call itself that might help. So RPA, robotic process automation, those applications can trigger processes, pass work on to others, copy data into multiple databases without making any errors. And that has the kind of effect of reducing unnecessary repeat calls due to agent error. Skills-based routing, yep, that's been around for a long time now, but it still has a positive impact by making sure that agents are matched with customers, and that obviously increases chance of first-time resolution. It's possible to go beyond first contact resolution into what we call zero contact resolution. Not strictly accurate, but there we are. If a business has seen that somebody at a certain stage of a customer journey, remember the customer journey analysis, if they've seen before that those type of people are likely to contact them about an issue, you can proactively send that information out to the customer before they even need it. So you certainly not just reducing repeat calls, but reducing the first call in the first place. I mentioned knowledge workers here. These people, they may not necessarily work within the contact center itself, but they can be a key resource for usually complex technical queries that might otherwise take a first line agent several attempts to find the right information and save everybody a lot of time. But obviously, these people's time has to be managed very carefully. Training. All agents benefit through improved training, of course, but especially those in a hybrid or remote working environment who might not find it as easy to just turn and ask a colleague or a supervisor about an issue in real time. And that's going back to the kind of AI assisted real-time analytics. That's the sort of thing, you've got a little buddy on your desk that can help you out with that type of thing. And finally on there, we've got consistent and accurate knowledge bases. So not every agent can know the answer to everything, and having this knowledge base that is kept up to date and accurate and shared across all the channels is perhaps the key to reducing unnecessary repeat calls. And this is what agents in the UK have actually got access to in terms of knowledge sources. We can see that only a minority of agents have access to a knowledge base, let alone anything particularly kind of sophisticated, like my old friend there, the AI virtual assistant sitting on the desktop. Well, pretty much everybody's got access to the internet and manuals, frequently asked questions. Only 39% of contact centers even use a kind of any sort of knowledge base. And like I say, far fewer have one with any particular level of sophistication. So my final slide is, just introducing the kind of knowledge bases really, because we believe that having the right knowledge available to the right agents at the right time is key to first contact resolution, which obviously impacts hugely on customer experience and all the other good things. Knowledge bases, again, not particularly straightforward, because with the best will in the world, knowledge bases often start off being quite tightly defined and giving answers to the most frequently asked questions. But over time, as information changes, more levels of complexity added and resources moved away from the project, it's very easy to kind of lose control of this, and it becomes progressively less useful and accurate, because knowledge bases aren't static. They need ongoing updates and interventions to keep them fresh and useful. and they really should be seen as being a tool across multiple channels. So somebody on web chat needs to have the same access to the same information as somebody on a phone call or handling an email. It seems pretty obvious that, but you'd be surprised how often it doesn't happen. It's important to be realistic, realize not every single piece of information can be kept entirely up to date, and available to anybody who needs it. So it also makes sense to focus on the most widely requested information and make sure that that's a priority. And building a knowledge base from a standing start can be a pretty long and onerous task depending on how it's done. So crowdsourcing of answers and feedback and accuracy and success will help the business to kind of fine tune the knowledge base and train any AI that's being used. It is possible to add the right answers to the knowledge base pretty quickly if a response has been marked in the past to be successful, and AI can help with this. So I'm going to hand over to Steve from Enghouse Interactive. Like I say, the report is fresh and free and up on the website today. So yes, over to Steve.
Perfect, thanks, Steve. And as we've just seen, FCR is a complex metric. I mean, it provides contact center teams useful insight into their performance. But how do we improve this metric and all of the others that Steve mentioned that our industry expects us to track? And at Enghouse, we believe knowledge is a key tool to improve FCR metrics. And I want to focus on knowledge workers just for a second. Steve mentioned knowledge workers in the last couple of slides there. And these are defined as workers whose main capital is knowledge. These typically include doctors, architects, engineers, scientists, accountants, and lawyers. And these are people whose job is to think for a living. And as Steve mentioned, and I agree, is contact center workers should also be on this list. As contact center managers and operators, we're expected to have knowledge about so many facets. We need to be able to extract actionable insights, to create and distribute information across the team, as well as to customers to answer their question. And we need to be able to quantify the impact our actions are having. How do we learn more about our customers, answer their questions, and measure how successfully teams are delivering the service our customers expect? In this part of our session today, I'm going to look at how some of the Enghouse solutions can help you do just that. I'm sure most of you store data about your customers in a CRM. However, most of this data is numerical. And in addition to names and addresses, you probably have details on how much this customer has spent, when they last contacted your business. You may even have a customer satisfaction or an NPS score. The issue I see with these is that whilst a numerical score is useful to track financials and trends, it can't tell you why customers gave you that score, or why they contacted you, or what factors are impacting their opinion of your business and the likelihood of them continuing to be your customers. Numerical data doesn't help you really understand your customers. After all, customers will tell you what matters when it matters, but you need to be listening. Voice of the customer solutions, also known as conversation analytics, can help you understand your customers. Enghouse's proprietary AI engine is capable of uncovering the details that enable businesses to truly understand the voice of their customers and to get actionable insight. Our AI engine is different to most others. It is based on proprietary technology which is focused on customer service. It uses a hybrid approach with advanced natural language processing, which gives us a greater deal of precision than other solutions. But what does this really mean? Word clouds, like the one we can see on the screen, are commonly used to attempt to show what is being talked about within a body of text. However, on its own, this collection of words doesn't really tell us that much. We need more detail. And at Enghouse, we recognize that a word on its own is not enough to extract meaning. A word out of context has little meaning and no sentiment. And this means the minimum unit of meaning is a sentence. These three sentences all mention the word delivery, but they each mean something very different. The Enghouse AI engine is able to achieve this extra level of precision, and this is vital when analyzing what is happening within calls and emails. From a non-technical perspective, we have taught our AI engine how to understand the structure of a human sentence, the subject, the verb, the object, and to differentiate between questions, statements, requests, and issues. This is vital as your customers can say the same thing in a multitude of ways, and the AI needs to be able to understand all of them. As I just mentioned, the Enghouse Conversation Analytics solution is based on our own proprietary and artificial intelligence technology that accepts content from any channel, be it customer surveys and reviews, emails and web chats, as well as call transcripts. Our AI engine processes the content and detects the details and of the detailed topics and themes and risks such as customer churn or customer effort. And this is when a customer has had to expend more effort than they were anticipating. I've had to call twice now. We're talking about FCR. It's a big one if someone's telling you they've had to call twice. And this risk is often a precursor to the complaint or customer churn. The engine is also able to detect sentiment and emotion that's connected to the topics it detects. This data is combined to create reports, dashboards, and annotated transcripts, which can then be shared with the teams that can use this knowledge to make a difference. From customer service and success teams to store managers, each group will be presented with actionable insights that can drive improvements in all of your metrics, including FCR. But more importantly, it can help your teams really understand your customers. Understanding what your customers think about your business and what they want from your business is important, but you also need to be able to answer their questions accurately and consistently. As Steve said, few things upset customers more than incorrect or inconsistent responses. Worryingly, I recently read a study where 43% of colleagues admitted to giving customers inaccurate information just to provide an answer. And 26% of those surveyed said that searching for more knowledgeable colleagues is the biggest cause of inefficiency. So knowledge management is clearly vital within the contact center to provide accurate answers to your customers' questions, but also answer questions from your own team. Modern businesses present a multitude of challenges to the contact center team, and I'm sure most of the audience here will recognize those listed here. A constant barrage of repetitive questions, increasingly complex offerings that take an even longer amount of time to train on, and customers that expect faster and more comprehensive answers than ever before. Another recent consumer survey showed that 57% of customers surveyed expect to be able to find the answer to their questions themselves, and 70% were frustrated for having to wait for the answer to their question. And this is when the answers are often spread across multiple systems or even just in the employee's brain. The solution to all of this inevitable complexity is to centralize the information into a knowledge base. The Enghouse Knowledge Management solution can help your business deliver these answers to whomever needs them. At this point, it's worth reflecting on what knowledge management is. At its most basic form, knowledge management is about collecting information from those that have it and delivering it to those that need it. At several points during our session today, we've talked about contact center workers being knowledge workers. And there's an often repeated statistic that knowledge workers spend 38% of their time searching for information. And in customer service, it can even be even more if we don't provide the right amount of knowledge to the right people at the right time and in the right format. For example, we don't want to send a customer a 50-page manual to solve their problem when a few key instructions are all that's needed. And we shouldn't expect an agent to read through a complex document in the middle of a call. We need to tailor the information to the situation and the capacity of the audience to utilize this information. And as Steve mentioned earlier, it's also really important to be consistent across all channels, whether that is the customer self-service channels, such as the websites, chatbots, and IVRs, or the agent-assisted channels, voice, web chat, email, etc. In other words, the knowledge has to be everywhere, and the Enghouse knowledge base can deliver it to where it's needed. But it's not just about short text-based answers. Knowledge can be in the form of documents and even videos. From how-to videos to tutorials and other educational videos, I'm sure we've all at least once watched a video to teach ourselves something, whether it is learning to cook, how to use an appliance, or some DIY tips. And given that video is often seen as the best media to learn a new topic, it shouldn't be a surprise that it's estimated that 1/3 of internet users in the US have watched a tutorial or a how-to video this week. In business, it's the same. Research by Forrester showed that 75% of employees prefer to watch a video than read text. And just like the old saying that says a picture is worth 1,000 words, Forrester estimated that 1 minute of video was worth 1.8 million words. But once you've stored all of this information in a knowledge base, you need to access it quickly. Our knowledge base uses advanced artificial intelligence to deliver exactly the right piece of information, or even the precise moment in a video that contains the answer you're looking for. Combined with our email and web chat tools, this AI engine automatically suggests answers to the agents by understanding the customer intent and matching it to the content within the knowledge base. And this goes way beyond keywords. After all, as I mentioned a few moments ago, at Enghouse, we recognize that the minimum unit of meaning is a sentence. The power of making knowledge available everywhere has value for everyone it interacts with. Customers get fast and accurate answers when dealing with agents that are using a knowledge base, but they also benefit directly from web self-service and video knowledge portal. Agents are empowered with knowledge at their fingertips, giving them the confidence to focus on building a rapport with your customers. Indeed, one of our customers cut their onboard training time in half by making the Enghouse knowledge base the very first system new agents access on their first day. All of this leads to greater efficiency, as complete, accurate answers improves FCR, and this leads to happier and more loyal customers. Understanding your customers and answering their questions are two facets to improving customer service metrics like FCR. But how can we measure the impact of our changes? As contact center managers, how do we know that our agents are delivering the service that our customers are expecting? As Steve outlined, there are so many metrics, and each one provides a different take on what's happening within your contact center. In the first part of our webinar today, Steve made the argument for FCR, and I agree with him. It's a useful metric. But as I mentioned earlier, numerical values only give you part of the picture. They're great for comparisons and trends, but they don't tell you the details. Voice of the customer solutions like our own help you understand your customers, but there's another party in these conversations, your agent. In many contact centers, the agent evaluation process is a cornerstone of measuring what is happening within the contact center. It aims to evaluate agent strengths and weaknesses, highlighting areas for improvement and best practices that can be shared. But which agents should you evaluate? The ones you just hired and put through training, the ones who have had performance issues before, the ones pushing the company's new marketing promotion, or the ones providing service for the most complex product? How do you decide? And given that supervisors are only listening to or reading around 5% of the interactions that occurred within their contact center, it leaves 95% unchecked. 95% where there might be a coachable moment. 95% where there might be a significant or recurring issue that needs to be addressed. Our AI engine can help out here too, with our AI agent evaluation solution. Traditional contact centers, supervisors, or specialist QA teams manually check a random selection of interactions, simply because they don't have time to check every single one. But listening to average interactions with no actionable outcome is not where supervisors add most value. This time would be better spent coaching agents, as this is what brings the biggest benefits to the agents and in turn to the customer. Our AI-enabled agent evaluation solution uses our own AI engine to augment the evaluation of 100% of interactions across all channels. The solution replicates the supervisor's quality assessment thought processes, using AI to remove the need for manual review of random interactions, and to create real actionable insight. Automating quality management not only supplements metrics such as FTR, it helps identify additional coaching and training needs that will enable your agents to provide a consistent and high quality service. The additional information means that you can target improvement programs where they'll have the most impact. Continually improving agents and receiving timely customer insights leads to better customer experiences. Improving FCR is certainly about knowledge. Knowledge about your customers, knowledge about your offering and processes, knowledge about the performance of your agent. Knowledge is definitely power, but knowing where to apply that power is just as important.
Thank you, Steve. I believe that's the end of your presentation. Thank you very much. I think it's time to perhaps stop for some questions from our audience. If you don't mind, I think the first one, Steve, refers to something that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. You talked about a video knowledge solution. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely, yep. So we have a video knowledge solution. It's a SaaS solution, enables our customers to upload videos for use internally, for use externally. And I also mentioned that you can find the right moment of a video. It does that by searching the transcript of a video. So it automatically transcribes the video, and so that when you're searching for a topic, you can find the answer to the question even if it's in the middle of a video, which is really important for understanding that. So it's a really useful tool, both within the contact center and across the whole business.
Okay, the next question, I read it out. At my organization, we have multiple sources of knowledge all scattered across the business and often only in the heads of our employees. Where do I start centralizing this knowledge and making it available internally as well as externally?
That's a common problem. I think Steve mentioned on it with some of the questions from the report showed that how common it is in terms of the knowledge being spread around. It's about focusing on the most frequently asked questions. It's really easy to get caught up with let's put everything in the knowledge base, let's collect it from everywhere, and then put it all in one place. And to a certain extent, that's important, but that doesn't give you the quickest return on investment. Understanding what the customers are asking you is important. So I think I've mentioned this. I didn't mention this today, but I've mentioned this in other webinars, that if you're not sure what to do, measure first. So that could be looking at the questions, using conversation analytics to understand what your customers are saying, using a survey tool to understand what's important to your surveys. These are all things that can help with that situation.
Thanks, Steve. That's good advice. I've got another question here that perhaps Steve from ContactBabel could answer. How can we understand why we are getting multiple contacts? I know you touched upon it earlier in your presentation.
Yeah. I mean, you can get the data to show which contacts are repeating either through agent tags or automated analytics, and then building on that, find the patterns by analysing the subjects of the contact. So is it about deliveries? Is it about billing? Is it about a particular marketing campaign, which can often happen? Have a look at which channels they're coming in on. As Steve said, the questions being asked and the answers being given. That's quite an important thing as well. Is there consistency with the answers? What's the customer tried before then? For example, have they tried web self-service first? Perhaps there's an issue on web self-service which is driving this, or maybe a web chat agent has access to slightly inaccurate information, but he shouldn't do. So, as I say, you do need to make sure that your customers are actually still asking about the same issue if they're calling back. So just tracking how often a customer calls may well be inaccurate if they then call about a different issue. And it's not just a contact center thing, as I hoped I pointed out in the presentation. You need to understand what's changing in the business as well. Are there new processes, new marketing messages that may be confusing things for customers and driving multiple contacts? And really, it is quicker and more accurate to use something AI enabled rather than have agents flag up issues manually. But it is certainly worth asking agents what they're seeing and what they think has changed as well.
Okay, quite a complex issue, I suppose, and not a single simple answer. Okay, I think that's it with the questions that we received from our listeners. At this point, I would like to involve our audience in one last poll and get your plans, really. What tools are you planning to implement to improve FCR? Are you perhaps thinking about self-service options like chatbots, FAQs, or a knowledge base? Or are you perhaps planning to implement a quality management solution or invest in a contact center with omni-channel routing capabilities? If you could share your views with us. Okay. Oh, it's changing. I'll wait a few more seconds. Okay, that's interesting. It changed really during the last few seconds. Okay, I'll share the results with you.
Yeah,
okay.
looks to me as though Steve has managed to persuade people in the power of the knowledge base, which is excellent work. I'd say in terms of what we see in implementation, kind of industry-wide, the relatively quick win like self-service, like chatbots, FAQs, they're becoming much more popular now. So just as an example, probably 5 years ago, we had perhaps 2% of web chats being handled through automated means, and now it's well up at 20%. In fact, it may even be higher this year. So that's something that we've seen and growing greatly, but obviously behind all of these different channels, and we need, as you can see, a knowledge base here that's consistent and accurate. So it's what people seem to think.
Even if you aspire to implementing a chatbot because you believe that's going to provide the best option for your business, those chatbots need a source of content to serve automatically, and that source is a knowledge base. So if you're the first up, that's going to be what you're going to focus on.
Yeah, asking both of you one last time, do you have any other tips you want to share with our listeners when implementing new technologies that are aimed at improving FCR?
Yeah, really, it's not straightforward, as you can see, necessarily. It does require dedicated resource. It requires planning. It requires understanding what the problem is before you actually start, implementing any sort of technology. So this isn't just a kind of technology thing. It's very much about business processes and also the human elements as well, getting your agents on board to kind of share information as well. So yeah, that's
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's convincing. It's a team sport. Contact centers are a team sport. You need everyone to be buying into the strategy, and to deliver that with just technology. It's an exciting possibility, but it's a long way off yet. It needs the human element, and you have to take that into account. So I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Now that we've reached the end of our webinar, before you go, I would like to make you aware of two pieces of resource specifically around the topics we discussed today. Firstly, there is a new guide available, Delivering the Right Knowledge at the Right Time, a really, really interesting fresh piece of content that also contains a few real-life use cases. And secondly, the ContactBabel report launching today, the Inner Circle Guide to First Contact Resolution, the one that Steve Morrell based the facts and figures in his part of the presentation on. That is also available today, and I will include both pieces in a follow-up email together with a link to the recording of this webinar. So I would like to thank our experts for this interesting and engaging presentation. It's been a real pleasure listening to your insights and your advice. And of course, thank you also to our audience for joining us today. I hope you found it worthwhile. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful sunny day. Goodbye.